Thanks everybody for joining today. Just to give a little bit of background in our higher education moving from panic to prevention webinar today. First, we're going to talk a little bit about the campus environment. Curtis is going to talk about his experience and kind of what his view of the campus environment looks like. Then we'll talk a little bit about the threat trends and how they might differ in what Trinity Cyber sees in the commercial market compared to other spaces, and including in higher ed. And then how St. Mary's is currently using Trinity Cyber and its full content inspection, among other tools, to remediate threats. Lastly, we're going to talk Curtis is going to talk to us a little bit about how we can grow the cybersecurity culture in higher ed. And now I'd like to turn it over to Curtis to talk a little bit and give a little bit of background on St. Mary's University itself.
Thank you, John. I appreciate it, and welcome everybody today. I appreciate your attention here. Cybersecurity is always a complex endeavor, and it's also very complex in the higher education sector. St. Mary's University was founded in 1852. We're a medium-sized private university here in San Antonio, Texas. We serve about 3,500 students and about 600 employees. And in 23, we had students from about 41 states and 39 countries. So we have a pretty wide geographic footprint.
Thanks, Curtis. And just to share a little bit about Trinity Cyber, we are headquartered in Maryland, Virginia. We were founded in 2017. We were the inventor of full content inspection. And for those not familiar with that phrase, we'll talk a little bit about that later on. Trinity Cyber at its core detects and eliminates threats before they reach the campus network. And we also provide critical protection for systems that are already compromised. And we'll get a little detail later on after we set the stage of what that means for St. Mary's and what it means for our customers. But first, I'd like to turn it back to Curtis to kind of set a little ground with a polling question here on our panic or prevention theme today.
Good. Thanks, John. So how would you describe your cybersecurity program? Lots of panic and more or less a crisis management approach. There's some degree of panic, but moving in the right direction. You have a well-established cybersecurity and awareness program. And the last one would be cybersecurity is an institutional priority, and there is very good cultural awareness. Please take a moment to answer. All right. Good. Well, clearly it's most are pretty well advanced in this area, so that's absolutely wonderful. Lots of cybersecurity awareness, and also cybersecurity is being seen more and more as an institutional priority. So that's a very good result there. Very happy to see that. So let's talk a little bit about the campus. Oh, John, sorry.
Yep, that's all right. So we'll talk a little bit about kind of the campus environment from the threat levels that we see today. So in the 2024 EDUCAUSE top 10 list, cybersecurity is a core competency as the #1 factor in the drive to develop institutional resilience. Higher education institutions, as we probably all know, remain prime targets for adversaries, malware and phishing being the leading attack metrics that those institutions are typically facing. From the most prominent cyber attacks in education, ransomware, again, being one of the largest, 116 ransomware attacks in education in 2024, 1.8 million records affected, and the average ransom demand was about just under $1 million, $847,000. And as we all know, I'm sure Curtis can attest to that, that is a huge expenditure for a university or frankly, any industry to have to deal with. U.S. schools and colleges lose an average of $550,000 per day to downtime from a ransomware attack. So not only a disruption in service, a disruption in continuity, business continuity, delivering to the students, but also has a huge financial impact as well. So the campus environment is still a large target for threat actors, ransomware kind of being at the top of their list, and obviously the monetary demands that places on organizations to be prepared and to be able to stop those attacks is paramount. So let's look quickly here at what a typical threats prevented looks like in a commercial entity. So the Trinity Cyber team went back and pulled some research basically on event counts basically over a typical year. So we took 2024, now that we have a complete year's data, and basically looked at the number of attacks that a commercial client would see over a year. And you can see for the most part, it's pretty standard. You see kind of what you would expect, where in November and December you see a bit of an uptick as people go away on holiday. Attackers love using that as a way to gain intrusion. You've got Cyber Monday and all sorts of transactional things that are happening toward the end of the year. But typically overall, it's a pretty flat attack surface month to month and throughout the year. But if you start to look at the higher education environment, and this is particular to St. Mary's, you can see a much different picture. And a lot of this is driven by kind of student seasonality. So, for example, in January, when most students are at home or maybe slowly returning back to campus, the attacks that we see are generally pretty low. As we go through the semester and, of course, spring break into April and May, we suddenly see those attacks shoot up. And for the case of St. Mary's, you have a lot of students that are going overseas. They're visiting families. I think Curtis mentioned early on that they're covering a number of international student bodies as well. So as they come back to campus, those devices are then infected with things that they're seeing on the network. Again, that quiets down as we go over the summer months. The students are away from campus. They're typically not on the student network or on the campus network, so you're going to see that fall off. And then in August, of course, what happens? Not only do you have a freshman class that are bringing brand new devices onto the network, but you've also got all the other students that are returning from their summer break as well. So a huge jump in the amount of threats that you start to see coming back from that campus. And not only that, but you've got all these brand new devices that have never been on the network previously that ultimately are, for lack of a better term, pretty dirty when it comes onto the network. That tends to die off as Curtis will talk about remediating, doing threat training and those sorts of things with the student body, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But then they start to pick up again toward the end of the year as students come back from Thanksgiving break. So traditionally, it's when these devices leave the network and then come back is the general theme of where we see these peaks and valleys with the threat service that a university is facing. And I would think that if we were to take this picture for the other folks that are representing higher ed or even state and local would probably see something similar from a standpoint of what their environment looks like in these peaks and valleys in the threat surface. So given that, I'm going to turn it back over to Curtis to talk a little bit about another polling question that we have as it relates to this panic or prevention movement.
Thanks, John. So describe the staff resources you have dedicated to addressing cybersecurity. You have a staff member that's a part-time responsibility, extra responsibility. You have a full-time staff member that focuses on cybersecurity as their primary role. Perhaps you have a small team, 2 or 3, that are dedicated to cybersecurity, or you're part of a larger organization. You have 4 or more staff that are focusing on cybersecurity and addressing cybersecurity threats. I'll give you a minute to take a look at that and respond. Well, so we're pretty well distributed here. Very good, very good. So yeah, some have just a single staff member, some have a part-time staff member, small team, and then a couple of us have a larger security team. So it's probably indicative of the size of our organizations. So thank you very much. So our ability to attract and retain cybersecurity professionals, it's a tough marketplace for higher education in that. A lot of time we feel like we're the OJT folks, the trainer folks. We'll get them in, we'll get them trained up and on cybersecurity, and boom, they leave us for much more lucrative positions, either at a company or at a DoD, or in a lot of these are remote jobs. So some of these things that we just can't compete with. So our ability to attract and retain cybersecurity professionals is a challenge. There is a robust BYOD. A lot of those lines on that chart that John showed are, basically threats trying to exploit student devices or devices that are not as well protected as we would hope that they would be. These systems spend a good deal of time away from campus and away from the campus network. In many computer users, another thing is many computer users are just not accustomed to operating in an enterprise environment. Those of us who are used to enterprise environment, we see the Windows update come through, we see the Chrome updates come through, we see this. We're going to apply those in fairly good time. Whereas if you're not used to that environment and you're not really aware of those threats, you may procrastinate on those, and that opens you up to some liabilities and some risks. Need for a high degree of autonomy. So our faculty members and our staff members, they have university issued computers. We run EDR on them, but they have a need for a high degree of autonomy. That staff person wants to install the software that they need, get it up and running when they need it. That faculty member, a lot of times, she'll be walking into a class and think about a course pack that they needed to download and install, or an open source piece of software that a student mentions in a teaching and learning environment, teaching session, and they want to install it and run it. And there's a need for a high degree of autonomy over these endpoints. And so it makes it difficult to lock them down as much as we would like to lock them down. There is an ever-changing threat environment. It seems like there's new zero-day threats and other threats coming out all the time. And it is a very dynamic environment, and it's important to monitor it and be aware of what's happening out there. Well, as you mentioned a little bit before, we have a distributed community. We support many different sites, different locations. We have remote learners and remote instructors, and also remote staff. We have consultants that are coming into our systems from afar to help, provide instruction, provide resources, provide support for our systems. They all need access to our key systems.
Yeah, and I think that kind of leads us to the threat landscape. One of the pieces of the cog of what Curtis was just talking about is that ever-changing threat landscape. And what I'm showing here is David Bianco kind of created this. It's called the Pyramid of Pain. And basically what it shows is the ever-growing challenge with the cybersecurity space as you go to the higher part of this pyramid. Everyone that I talk to acknowledges that what we're doing is a cyber form of whack-a-mole. And we keep doing it. It's not going to scale. It's not something we're ever going to win. If you ask any new CISO or even someone like Curtis, who's been around for a while, the first thing that they're going to do when they take the job is develop an inventory of all the endpoints and try to map all their vulnerabilities. Vulnerability scanning, pen testing, we've all heard it before. For most enterprises, it's an impossible task. Not only is the number sometimes unaccountable, not knowing how many devices on your network, where that printer's plugged in, who's running that server in their closet. But by the time you're done with inventorying, it's completely changed again. And you can imagine that even gets exacerbated in an educational environment where you've got devices coming on and off the network pretty much at a constant clip. Curtis, I think you said at one point the average number now for devices is about 5 per student. So you can just imagine the amount of devices that are constantly changing, even more so in an educational environment than you would ever see in a commercial entity or thereabouts. I'm not saying, what I'm not saying is that knowing what you have to protect is a bad idea, but if we could focus on the bad guys and the much smaller set of tools and the methods that they employ, I think that's where we gain an advantage. So if you look at this pyramid of pain, if you look at things like hash values, IP addresses, domain names, network artifacts, attackers are going to have the advantage, especially in the advent in this day of age with AI. They can pivot just as quickly, if not as quickly as the tools that we have today. And that's where we get into a game of whack-a-mole. We're constantly blocking IP addresses. We're constantly trying to keep up with the newest hash values. But if we could go to the tip of this pyramid, where we're starting to react to the tools, the tactics and techniques and procedures that an adversary is using, that's where a defender has an advantage. Your detection depth would have to be deep in content, and your accuracy would have to be bulletproof. Or, of course, you would break the internet. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So what if it was possible to pause every network session, fully inspect the content at the application layer, and identify the tried and true tools and methods adversaries use, not the IOCs, not those indicators of compromise that are at the bottom of that pyramid. and then be able to edit those tools and methods out of live network traffic to stop threats before they become an incident or a loss, and be able to do it so fast to be unnoticeable and so precise that false positives literally become a thing of the past. We feel that this really could change everything. This new approach kind of refocuses energy on the actors and their techniques, which are relatively few, rather than all the things that need to be protected, which are, as we've mentioned, completely uncountable. This is a way to scale the threat for something in the defender's advantage, and take the role away from the attacker having the constant advantage against us. So the way that Trinity Cyber works is we start with assuming that all network traffic is compromised. Everything coming in and out of the network we assume is dirty. We then fully parse and inspect every single network session. We apply state-of-the-art detections. We call them internally formulas. That's basically a detection in action that are 1,000 times deeper than Yara rules. And they focus on the TTPs, not hash values, not IP blocks, not geo-blocking. Then we prevent, not alert, on those threats in real time in line with the lowest false positive rate in the industry, and completely rebuild a clean session and then deliver that clean network traffic to its final destination, both inbound and outbound. So a completely different way, and we call it full content inspection, of doing things compared to what we've, I think, traditionally done in the network space. So I think that kind of transitions us pretty well to our third polling question, which I'll turn it back over to Curtis to present to the group here.
Describe the level of cybersecurity support and awareness by senior administration at your location. There's little support or general awareness. It's just not on their radar as a business or operational risk. There's good support in moderate awareness. They see it as a business necessity. They'll throw money at it when they have to. Or there's strong support. There's a deep level of awareness. They see it as an institutional priority. They expect a plan, but they'll also fund and support major aspects of that plan. Please take a moment. Well, I'm very happy to see the first one is 0. That is a refreshing thing to see. But yeah, good support and a moderate amount of awareness. There's one there, and then but most are up in the strong support, deep level awareness. You're getting the message out there. The message is resonating with the folks who can be supportive in the way of funding and amplifying your message about the importance of cybersecurity. So that's very, very important. We'll talk a little bit about that in a couple minutes. So why is cybersecurity so painful in higher education? The first one is executive awareness. And it seems like most of us have broken the code on getting our executives aware of these issues that we're facing and the importance of protecting our data in our systems. But our executives have competing priorities, and there's competing priorities for budget and staffing. Right now on our campus, we're a tuition-driven institution. The areas of enrollment management, student retention, student success, new program development, also alumni, the alumni development. Those all take a lot of focus of the executives, and quite frankly, it takes a lot of oxygen out of the room when folks like me walk up and say, "Hey, we need some money for a new EDR or a cloud DR platform." So there's a lot of competing priorities. The industry ecosystem, this one's both a blessing and a curse. I think back to 15, 20 years ago, there weren't a lot of options, and compared to now, there weren't any good options. But there's many solutions and there's many vendor options out there now. Now, sometimes these vendors come and go. It may be a startup that gets assumed by somebody else. It might be someone who's really established in the market, but they're kind of coasting. We got to figure those things out. It's a complex marketplace. There's also issues with incompatibility. There's incompatible systems, and incompatibility can rest in a lot of different areas. It could be, hey, this system is just not going to be compatible with our network topology or some of the other systems that we have in place. It may be an incompatibility with the skill set and the the maturity level, the depth of maturity level that you have as far as cybersecurity expertise on your team. And the last is complex licensing and contract. Well, I don't have to tell anyone here that contracts and licensing has gotten very, very complex. And, long past seem the days of perpetual licenses. And more and more, it's more of a use type license base. I remember the times where we'd say, hey, we have 600 employees. We get the license to cover them, and it extends to all of our students, and boom, we're done. There's still quite a few of those out there, but they're becoming less and less. Our partners, our vendors are moving to much different licensing terms and in different contracts. There's a lot of external factors that are very, very complex, and complex government controls. Department of Ed, there's a lot of reporting and data exchange involved with them and their partners. We have to comply with FERPA, HIPAA, GLBA, in the PII requirements, exposure disclosure requirements, state, federal reporting requirements, and we also have audits. Audit compliance that we have to attend to. Campus community. This is a very important one. And this is one that we have a lot of control over. Those external factors, we don't have a lot of control over. All we can do is respond and anticipate and be ready. But our campus community, we have a lot of control over that. A lot of ways to control that, but it is largely a decentralized environment, and there's multiple environments. We have folks focusing on administrative computing, or in the administrative areas, the academic and instructional areas, the research. If you have a group doing research on your campus, you know that sometimes they operate under a different set of rules, or they expect to operate under a different set of rules, and you have to finesse that. There's a grants component. Grants are very, very important to many institutions, but a lot of times our researchers will be acquiring systems and solutions that haven't fully been vetted to exist in our campus computing network. And the last is bring your own device. 3,500 students, each one has definitely a computer and a phone and a smart watch and all the IoT devices out there. There's a lot of noise out there on our internal campus network, and there's a lot of traffic going through our main internet service provider. The last, and it's kind of a self-inflicted wound, but I think it's something that's a part of becoming a part of the past. Higher ed is known to have a little bit slower pace and a little bit slower response time. One of my big misgivings, and I roll my eyes on this, is the military and higher ed pretty much invented the internet, but it took the finance and banking industry to show us how to use the internet. Business really took this and ran with us, and I a little nervous to see what would happen if they didn't jump in there and what we would be doing. I'm sure we'd be past email by now, but maybe not too much further past email. So with all these threats coming our way, and there are a lot of them, and they are changing, there are new ones being added, and each one of these has many, many dimensions. What do we do to help mitigate these? So here's a list of some of the prominent cybersecurity pains that we see out there. The viruses, the phishing, the malware, the ransomware and command and control, social engineering, outdated patches, zero-day exploits, human error, DDoS attacks, third-party trusted partner exploits. That's becoming more and more of a focal point and more of a risk factor that we need to address. Unauthorized account access, and then data breaches. This list can go on several pages, but these are some of the main ones that kind of are top of mind. And on the other side are some of our mitigation factors, and most of the folks on here will be familiar with these. Using the email security tools, endpoint detection, and awareness. And awareness, fits in quite a few of these because it is so important to have your campus community aware of the cybersecurity threats, aware that their data could be at risk, and what to do to defend against that. I wanted to mention just on a couple of these. Patch management. It's very important to have a solid patch management, operationalize your patch management and your change management processes. The vendor management. So we have to get better and better about contract reviews, about what's contained in those contracts, and be able to make sure that our vendors are protecting our data at least as well as we are protecting our data. Thanks, John. So how do we grow the cybersecurity culture in higher education? We have to engage our executives. We have to look for opportunities to have conversations with them. And we need to be aware that they want to have those conversations. If you walk into a board report, or you're with board of trustees or any senior executives on campus, and there was a data breach in your area, there was a data breach in higher education, use that as an opportunity to have a conversation of the importance. It's good for you to initiate the conversation, or at least be ready for that conversation. Should it happen, because folks are going to have questions. Be involved in the risk management briefings. If you have a risk management committee or a team on your campus and they're looking at slips, trips, and falls on campus, other things that opens the campus up to liability, cybersecurity needs to be right in there because it is a big risk and it is a big liability for the campus. And then always look for an opportunity to update your stakeholders on what you're doing for cybersecurity. If you're bouncing a system at midnight to implement something or put a new cybersecurity system in place, make sure your campus is aware that you're not just bouncing systems at 3 a.m. to bounce them. You're bouncing them to help make sure the community is secure in their cybersecurity and with their data. Partnerships are key. You have to build strong partnerships, and partnerships aren't built overnight. It takes some time to do that. Trinity Cyber, we've been with Trinity Cyber for 3 years. They've been an absolutely wonderful partner. We'll talk a little bit more about it, but their stuff just works, and it doesn't interfere with our esports team or other things happening on campus. It just works. Microsoft and Google have wonderful security tools out there. CISA is a very, very strong organization. They have some really good resources and tools. I'll mention them again in a little bit. And then vendor demos and pilots. You have to constantly be doing environmental scans. You might be on an EDR or something that's served you very well for 3 or 4 years. That contract is coming up. 5-6 months before that contract is up, that's your opportunity to start doing that environmental scan to make sure you see where that market is and see if the product you're with is really doing what it needs to do, and that company is forward-looking and forward-thinking in where they're going next. The external resources, lots of external resources out there. There's plenty of established cybersecurity frameworks. There's lots of higher education community resources. And one of the things I love about working in higher education is collaboration and working with one another is largely built into our DNA. Cybersecurity is critical to every campus, but we don't compete with each other on the basis of our cybersecurity stance or our cybersecurity posture. That opens that venue up for us to do some deep collaboration with other campuses, other institutions, talk to their folks, know about their pains, help them out with their pains. They can help you out with your pains, but it's a really great sharing community. And it's one of the things I really enjoy about being immersed in higher education. With that, I have to mention EDUCAUSE. EDUCAUSE has wonderful community groups out there. Some are focused specifically on cybersecurity. Others are in areas that kind of hit around cybersecurity, data retention and data governance and all these things that kind of feed into a cybersecurity stance on a campus, but may fall a little bit outside, true cybersecurity. And the last is Gartner and folks like Gartner and Infotech Research Group. There's several others, but they do great analysis. They do great market analysis on products that are available or products that are becoming available in the field that you can basically narrow that group of vendors and group of options that you look at by seeing where they're trending with Gartner's research or Infotech Research Group's analysis. The campus community. You have to be able to engage your campus community. You have to build awareness, and we do that through training, through exercises. We fish our campus at least monthly. We will get a report back and let us know, how we're doing as a campus. But we'll also dive into this report and take a look and see, do we have any repeat offenders? Do we have any repeat offenders who are, a little bit more click happy than we're comfortable with? Are those key offenders in sensitive positions? Are any of them in our finance department or HR department? Luckily, we don't have that here, but those are things you have to dig into and look, and you target those folks for some additional training and then maybe some additional monitoring. Have to have a great patch and change management system. You need to institutionalize or operationalize that. And you need to really look at how do we institutionalize cybersecurity. We do that here through our training. Hopping back to training, right now we do annual training on FERPA and Title IX and all these other kind of compliance. But over the last few years, we've been able to merge cybersecurity awareness, data loss prevention, protecting your data, these different social engineering. We've been able to merge those training components into our mandatory training. So folks get it when they're onboarding and they see it at least once a year. We have an e-newsletter that is very timely, that we keep up to date. Shopping seasons, or if Christmas is coming, our November newsletter will not only talk to them about cybersecurity threats that they can see daily in their work here, but also how to protect yourself online. How do you keep your credentials and your bad people out of your credit card account? The last is tabletop exercises. Our CISO, Isa Lopez, she has done a wonderful job about making this a community event. We do tabletop exercises every summer. We will invite our folks from our sister institutions to sit on those. Again, we have 2 sister institutions, and we collaborate very tightly on cybersecurity and other things. But our last one we had, it was run by CISA. CISA facilitated it. They did a wonderful job. They brought definitely some new perspectives into it that I think made it more valuable. But around this table, we have folks from the University Police Department, our university communications and marketing. Our chief of staff is there. Our vice president of alumni relations is there. Well, what would he be interested in that? Well, if we do get a campus cyber data breach, even if our alumni aren't impacted, once they hear about it in the news, his office is going to get some phone calls. So he has a vested interest in knowing about this process behind the scenes and how we address cybersecurity risk and how we would respond should we have a breach. A lot of people from our finance department are there. That's an important group to have. Our CFO attended the entire 4-hour tabletop that we had last time. That's a wonderful accolade in my book. And our HR department is there too. In our HR department, they more or less manage our cyber liability insurance agreement here. So they have a vested interest, and they are a very active participant in that as well. So look for an opportunity to build out that tabletop exercise, make it a community involvement event, feed them, and bring in someone from CIS or someone else to bring in an external perspective as well.
Yeah, that's great, Curtis. And So this kind of brings us to the end of kind of the core presentation. And before we turn it over to the audience Q&A, I wanted to kind of tee that up one. So if folks are thinking of questions, I haven't honestly had visibility into the chat, so I don't know if a bunch have come in. But if you do have some questions, now would be the time to kind of think about those and tee those up. But as we're doing that, I just wanted to say thank you to Curtis again, not only as a customer, but just as a friend and as a partner for continuing to support us at Trinity Cyber. When we go back to this kind of second pillar of partnerships, this truly is a partnership between St. Mary's and Trinity Cyber. We have, routine updates, calls with them, where Curtis and Issa and all the folks are on. We deliver the solution as a service, so there's constant communication back and forth between Curtis and his team and our team. We're doing threat hunts on his network, and I can tell you, Curtis can probably allude to some of the crazy things that we've seen on this network, especially as those students come back from their breaks at home or overseas. So I just wanted to say, in case we do run out of time, just Curtis, thank you to you for your continued support and from the university and for truly being a partner to us. It's really appreciated, and to get to do things like this with you, where you can kind of expand on your knowledge of the cybersecurity culture in higher ed and kind of what it takes is really meaningful, not only to us, but hopefully for the rest of the community as well.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John. It is wonderful work with Trinity Cyber. One of the big value points with Trinity Cyber is, a lot of our board of trustees are private business owners. A lot of them are attorneys. We have a large law school here, so our board members, tend to run in that either their own business, or they're attorneys or have their own law firms. And they know quite a bit from that perspective about cybersecurity. But when I can sit down and when they ask me, what are we doing about cybersecurity? How protected are we with cybersecurity? And I can go through all the usual ones that they pretty much have heard, but then I can tell them, and we have this other thing that's monitoring traffic that's coming to campus. It's inspecting it. It's getting the bad stuff out and letting the good stuff go through. And then if something gets compromised on campus and it's beaconing out to bad actors, these guys are monitoring that traffic and keeping it from going to where it's intended to go, letting us know so we can. It's a great story to tell them. It's a great way to engage them, because they did not know this type of service existed a lot of times. And so it just builds a good case for a solid discussion around cybersecurity.
Thank you, Curtis. And that's probably a great way to transition into our audience Q&A. So I'll pause and see if there's any questions in the chat. And then, happy to, Curtis, I know you are as well, happy to answer any questions that folks have. And again, thank you all for attending today, but I did want to leave some time here for Q&A.
Thank you, Curtis and John. Again, if you would like to submit a question, please look to the Q&A pod at the bottom of the screen. We do see a question from David directed at John. Regarding the point of compatibility, can you touch on how Trinity Cyber's cloud scanning model can help mitigate compatibility concerns?
So from the standpoint of compatibility, are you talking about Trinity Cyber's compatibility with other things in, say, like a cybersecurity stack, or with compatibility issues between two separate devices?
I believe he's asking of Trinity Cyber's.
Okay. So I will say, because of where Trinity Cyber sits, and we didn't get it too much into the minutia of this, because I really wanted to kind of do a high level presentation, not really just talk about Trinity Cyber, but we typically sit outside of the network environment. So from a compatibility standpoint for us, it's really simply a firewall configuration that points us as a proxy in between you and your internet service provider. So from a compatibility standpoint for us, there really is no issue. I mean, we are able to parse iOS, PC, Linux, from protocols. There's a whole list of those that we're parsing. There really isn't compatibility in the sense where we can't stand in front of a lot of the other tools that you're using, simply because of where we sit in the environment, which is basically outside of the network. In fact, we have some solutions where we integrate with Zero Trust. We're able to inspect cloud traffic as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use us that are pretty novel as compared to maybe some of the other tools that you're using today. But from a compatibility standpoint, there's there's really far and few between. And typically those are overcome with just some configuration changes, like at your firewall or with an exclusion policy. Hope that answered your question.
Thank you, John. And then for our next question, this one's for Curtis. Why did St. Mary select Trinity Cyber? And what are three things you like about the full content inspection capability?
Very good question. So we selected Trinity Cyber about 3 years ago. We were doing a lot of work rebuilding basically our main connection to the internet. We had a small grant to switch things over from use AT&T as our backup and use Learn, which is local Lone Star Educational Research Network here, as our primary. And with that, once we switched to that topology, then we were able to actually engage Trinity Cyber in that model. So that worked out very, very well for us. We were looking for something to help build a little more resilience to our cybersecurity stance. We had not yet engaged things like MDR and SIEM. We added those within the last year and a half. So Trinity Cyber was pretty, again, we increased our network topology, our primary, and then we had a backup internet provider. So we were able to bring them in and really solidify that and protect that traffic. With things I like, I mentioned a couple of them. It just works. Hopefully, I think it allows our CISO to get a few more hours of sleep each night. But more so than that, I've seen this in action. I've seen where, we would have a student system that was compromised, a CNC attack on it, and boom, they just let us know about it. We're able to isolate that system, get it off the network. Then our other folks work with student development to contact that student because they don't want to hear from us. They want to hear the student development's better at reaching out to them than we are. But then we work with them, we bring it in, we clean up that system, and then Trinity Cyber will say, will tell us, okay, yeah, this is clean now, this traffic is looking good. Trinity Cyber is also pretty good at letting us know when we have network issues that we don't know about. So we have BGP in place, so we have things fail over automatically to our redundant internet link. Trinity Cyber is monitoring our primary, so when we go dark on our primary, they are calling us. They're letting us know very quickly, hey, you may want to check things. And 9 times out of 10, things have failed over. Our main went down, so things just automatically failed over. But it's just nice knowing that they're out there, another set of eyes out there watching out for us.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that, Curtis, I think we've even seen a handful of 0 days on your network that we've stopped before even patches were out there. So yeah, it's been a pretty incredible journey over the last 3 years, kind of seeing what we've seen on the network and have been able to stop. So it's been a powerful relationship for sure.
Thank you, Curtis and John. And this next question is for John. Besides higher ed, what are some of the other markets that Trinity Cyber is well suited for and why?
Great question. So we do a lot of work in federal government and U.S. military. So we have a very large protection footprint for that area. We do a lot in critical infrastructure, so figure power, water treatment plants, those sorts of things. We obviously do quite a bit in SLED and higher education, but other parts of SLED as well. Financial services, service organizations themselves. Those are some of probably the biggest areas that we serve. But I mean, honestly, we've got some customers that are some of the largest networks on the planet, all the way down to customers that are 10-person accounting firms. So really kind of covers the broad spectrum. But yeah, that's a great question.
Thank you, John. We have another question from Steve. We are a credit union and have been a Trinity Cyber customer for 2 years. Thank you for everything. Trinity Cyber is the best. Oh, it's actually a compliment. All right. Thank you, Stephen, and thank you, John and Curtis as well. Just one last question. How does FCI handle 0 days?
That's a great question. The easiest way to explain it is a lot of times we already have a protection in place, and part of that is based on the fact that we're looking at those tactics, techniques, and procedures. And in fact, I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier. Even on St. Mary's network, we had seen and stopped what was considered a zero-day threat, something that had first been seen in the wild on St. Mary's network on a number of different occasions. In the small case that we don't necessarily have a protection already in place, we're typically able to get something in protection to all of our customers within 2 to 4 hours. We have a number of use cases of that. Going back to Log4j, which we had a protection in under 4 hours. There's been Papercut. There's been a handful of them, that have come out where we may not already have the protection, but we're able to do it even before a patch is released. And they're really kind of patch proof too. We've seen examples where patches aren't effective. They have to release a second patch, but in that sense, Trinity Cyber is able to provide that enduring protection. So another great question, but yeah, for the most part, we're able to stop those 0 days kind of before they even start. And for ones that have yet to be identified by us or by the threat intelligence feeds that we subscribe to, we're typically able to get protections up in a matter of hours.
John,
Thank you both.
your
Oh, go ahead.
protection with those 0 days is definitely takes some stress off of our CISO. I have to tell you firsthand, it's a great level of protection.
Anything I can do to get anyone in cybersecurity a little more sleep at night, it makes me happy.